Hello folks, I'm repotting an orchid today. This is Polymnia, a phalaenopsis orchid that I've had for a while, and she is a scented hybrid. So, phalaenopsis orchids normally don't have much scent. Let me get this out while I talk. And, but people really like scented flowers, so folks have been breeding scented orchids for a while. And for Polymnia, she had a very faint, lemony, citrusy scent. Very lovely. But the fact that her flowers are basically done. She's got 2 left out of all these stalks. So I think it's time to repot her, particularly because the pot she came in is absolutely crazy terrible. Look at that. It's just flimsy. It doesn't have any aeration holes on the sides. So in fact, I cut some slits earlier on to help with the aeration. It just has the one hole in the bottom. So this is an absolutely horrible orchid pot. Orchids need lots of aeration, which is why there are ceramic orchid pots like this. Little pretty design, little open holes. Most of the time people put orchids in plastic pots with the slits on the side. Whoop! And that's falling out. And then put the plastic pot inside just a plain ceramic pot that looks pretty for decoration. But there are pretty orchid pots that have some decorative holes for them. So I'm going to give a try putting Polymnia in this without a plastic inner pot. This is just here to hold some medium that we're going to use in a minute. So the first thing to do is get this plastic off. It should be pretty easy because it's so flimsy. They just peel right off. So here we go. Yep. Easy peasy. And then the next thing to do is to get this sphagnum moss out. And it was jammed in there. I really hate that. Sphagnum moss is a good medium, but you can leave it loose so that the orchid can breathe, and that uses less moss too. So I'm not really sure why a lot of nurseries use like a giant wad of sphagnum when a smaller amount would be cheaper for them and would be better for the orchid. Like, why are you doing this? I don't know. Maybe it's just that people who aren't trained in the nursery are just cramming sphagnum in as tightly as they can. I have no idea. But anyway, this sphagnum isn't super broken down. It's not terrible medium, but it's just so packed in that you can see there's almost no roots in the middle. Because even with that horrible cup, the moss was so tight that the roots went around the edges rather than try to burrow into that tight packed mess. So they'll probably really appreciate having these breathing holes in the pot there and being in a loosely packed medium and not this tightly packed, suffocating horribleness. Anyway, at least sphagnum does come off easily, unlike some other mediums, so this won't be too hard. I'm almost done already. Just gotta get the last little bits out there. Yep. And Polymnia is a miniature phalaenopsis. I have mostly miniature phalaenopsis orchids because I don't really have the space for giant orchids. I have one big one that I rescued, Euterpe, and I don't know what she'll be. She's not really huge for a full-sized phalaenopsis, but you know. She had dead flowers on her, and they were kind of purplish. I don't know if that's because they were darkening up because they were dead, and the originals are going to be pink, or if they're going to be purple. Of course, Polymnia here is yellow. And when she blooms again, she'll be yellow again. And scented again, and I'm very excited for that. Oh, and I'm delighted for how much good roots she has. Somebody obviously was very mean to the air roots that were coming out the top here. And they're all dead, so we're going to trim some of those off because we don't need dead roots hanging out here. So, let's get that. And a little bit of that's okay. The rest of it's dead. That one's dead at the tip. So yeah, you want to get out the dead roots because dead roots tend to rot. And of course, rotten stuff down in the medium will tend to make the medium itself start rotting, and the whole thing will just get gross and be unhealthy for the plant. And so that's why we trim dead roots. I'm not sure I've mentioned that before. We trim dead roots just to avoid having rot down in the pot where it will hurt the whole endeavor. Because you really don't want rotten stuff bringing, stuff that's decomposing attracts decomposers, bacteria, and insects, and all kinds of nonsense. So we want to not have decomposers down in the pot. So I'm going to get as much of this dead root out as we can. But most of these roots are very alive, very green, very good. And of course, the ones in the middle aren't very green, but that's because they have not been exposed to sunlight. Phalaenopsis roots will photosynthesize, but the plant doesn't need that. It gets plenty of photosynthesis from its leaves. The roots are just kind of a bonus because they do sometimes hang out in the light, so why not? But you don't need to keep the roots in the light. And so, of course, if you have an opaque pot or somewhere where it doesn't get sunlight, that's fine. And this pot's going to be mostly opaque, so it's not going to get much sunlight, and I expect these roots are all going to turn yellow. But that's fine. Let's see. I don't see any more dead bits. Just some really healthy roots. Love it. Love to see that. So, here's our pot. And so let's see how we want this. We want it towards the middle, and we want to angle it just a little. Because Phalaenopsis plants, when you get them from nurseries, they're often straight up and down. But in the wild, they tend to grow sideways or even cascading downwards. So, I try to get them not... I think we want to put a handful in the bottom here. Alright, handful of our medium in the bottom. Bloop, 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 bloop. And, yeah. Then we'll just tilt this sideways just a bit. And shake some more of this down in there. Shoop-a-doop-a-doo, shoop-a-doop-a-doo. And this is orchid bark. And a little bit of coconut husk, actually. This is a mix I got. Oh man, that's just getting stuck in there. This is a mix I bought online from the Repotting company. But I also ended up adding a little bit of the fine orchid bark to it. And that's just going to fall out. That's just going to fall out of the holes in the sides. So we're going to have to shake this whole thing. And there's going to be some work to get this all set and in there. And we got to poke some of these in amid the roots, of course, because there's holes in there. Yep. But we're getting there. And in a lot of my orchids, I put in those clay pebbles, but I didn't happen to get any out this time, and I don't feel like I need to go get any because the coconut husk will make aerated spaces in this, so I don't need clay pebbles. This is just a very simple repot. Almost done. Little sphagnum in there, little bark, little fine bark bits. Man, this video is not my best content because I'm making a mess. I'm gonna have to clean this up after, actually. But you know what? Here's our little orchid in this pretty orchid pot, and with just a little work, this will be all cleaned up. And all gorgeous and all ready to not shed bits everywhere because I'll get all the bits out. And then we'll have such a pretty orchid. I mean, just look at that. Beautiful little abstract butterfly-y thing. Maybe it's a moth orchid. And this lovely little flower at the end. And of course, someday she'll have a whole nother flower spike next year, hopefully. And that will be lovely. I am looking forward to when it gets to the fall season, and it will be easy for me to start reblooming some of these that will be ready to rebloom, I have to say. But of course, that's a long ways away because it's spring now. But anyway, oh, and I've got my goober child here. Hi, Lizzie.
Hi.
Hi. Yep. Joining me for the end of this video. Do you have anything to say to my viewers?
Thanks for watching this video, I guess.
Yep. Thank you all for watching. And we'll see you again later, next time I have some kind of interesting content to share.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.